The story begins by showing a courageous team of tunnel diggers venture deep beneath the bustling city of London, unaware of the ancient secrets that lie hidden beneath its very foundations. As fate would have it, they stumble upon a remarkable find, a labyrinth of interconnected tombs, steeped in the mysteries of a bygone era. This incredible discovery, partially submerged beneath the mighty River Thames, sends shockwaves through the nation, as the realization dawns that London itself rests upon an ancient cemetery. Whispers spread, and the tomb's origins are attributed to none other than the enigmatic Knights Templar, who once traversed the sands of Egypt before returning to England. Amidst the officers' investigation of the tomb's enigmatic deaths, a sudden intrusion occurs. A group of individuals, claiming to be government agents, swiftly commands the diggers to step aside. Curiously, the train line that once traversed the area is diverted, an unprecedented occurrence directly linked to the unearthing of the tomb. Meanwhile, we journey back in time to an era long past, where the future heir to the Egyptian kingdom, Princess Ahmanet, trains under the watchful gaze of her father, the pharaoh. As the sole offspring of the royal bloodline, Ahmanet is destined to ascend the throne and uphold her father's legacy. Revered as a divine being by her people, the course of Ahmanet's life takes an unforeseen turn when the pharaoh's wife gives birth to a male heir, posing a threat to Ahmanet's rightful place as the next ruler of Egypt. Driven by an unyielding ambition, Ahmanet takes a treacherous path, forging a pact with the god of death, Set. In the midst of a sacred ritual, a shadowy figure materializes, bestowing upon Ahmanet a dagger adorned with a crimson agate handle. As she clutches the weapon, Ahmanet's physical form undergoes a ghastly transformation, her once pristine skin now bearing the visage of death itself. Reborn as an ally to the god of death, Ahmanet wields her newfound power and mercilessly eliminates the pharaoh, his wife, and their newborn son. With the malevolence gripping her heart, Ahmanet embarks on a harrowing quest to resurrect the deity of death, channeling his essence into the body of a chosen man. However, as the ritual approaches its climactic conclusion, royal priests intervene, injecting Ahmanet with a potent concoction, paralyzing her in a drugged slumber. Condemned for her barbaric deeds, Ahmanet is subjected to the ancient practice of mummification, her lifeless form removed from the sacred land of Egypt and her very existence purged from the annals of history. In the present day, our focus turns to two American soldiers who lead a dual life as both merchants and illicit treasure hunters. Nick and his partner Vale operate in the shadows, using their positions to gather valuable antiquities. Armed with a stolen treasure map, Nick tempts Vale to join him in infiltrating a village located in the heart of eastern Mesopotamia. Unbeknownst to them, the village is under the control of rebel forces. Vale, aware of the inherent dangers, immediately refuses Nick's proposition. He understands the potential consequences not only for their own lives, but also the potential repercussions from their superior. However, Nick remains convinced that the treasures hidden within the village are of immense value, capable of transforming their lives in an instant. Little do they know that their expectations are about to be shattered. Despite Vale's reservations, Nick manages to sneak into the village, hoping to secure the coveted treasures. However, their presence does not go unnoticed, and heavily armed rebels soon give chase. Faced with the prospect of capture or worse, Vale's panic leads him to make an urgent call to the American Army headquarters, seeking assistance. Moments later, air support is deployed, unleashing a barrage of bombs upon the area, scattering the rebels in disarray. However, the explosive impact creates a gaping hole in the ground, triggering an unforeseen chain of events. As Nick and Vale attempt to escape, an avalanche ensues, causing them to plummet into the depths below. The force of the explosion triggers a landslide, revealing a long-forgotten cave hidden deep underground. Little do they know that their superior and a contingent of army personnel were already en route to the location, alerted by the discovery. Faced with their impulsive actions, Nick and Vale find themselves reprimanded by their boss, who was aware of their clandestine side profession. It becomes evident that their superior had knowledge of their penchant for stealing artifacts and treasures, intending to sell them on the black market. In the midst of the unfolding chaos, a woman named Jenny abruptly enters the scene, wasting no time in delivering a resounding slap to Nick. Her anger stems from the realization that he had stolen a map from her, which ultimately led him to this very location. Jenny, an archaeologist specializing in uncovering ancient structures in the Middle East, is taken aback by the exposed cave resulting from the explosion. Her keen insight immediately recognizes it as an ancient Egyptian tomb. However, the perplexing question arises as to why an Egyptian tomb would exist in the Mesopotamian region, thousands of kilometers away from Egypt itself. Their boss, having witnessed the turn of events, assigns Nick and Vale the responsibility for the incident. He demands that they accompany Jenny into the cave to assess its contents. As they venture deeper into the cavern, Jenny makes a startling discovery. She notices traces of mercury trickling along the passageways. A sense of unease washes over her, for in ancient Egyptian civilization, mercury was believed to possess the ability to weaken the power of evil entities. This starkly contrasts with the modern-day cosmetic usage of mercury, which falsely promises instant skin whitening. With their flashlights illuminating the way, the group progresses further, eventually stumbling upon a chamber containing a pool of shimmering mercury liquid. The significance of this find leaves them all questioning the true nature and purpose of the tomb they have stumbled upon. While Jenny diligently examines the tomb, Nick and Vale seize the opportunity to indulge in their own nefarious desires. Ignoring the gravity of the situation, Nick's eyes land on a weight connected to an unknown object by a rope, leading him to suspect the presence of hidden treasure. Driven by curiosity, he decides to sever the rope, causing the weight to plummet into the pool. To their horror, the act triggers the emergence of a grotesque sarcophagus from the depths, accompanied by a swarm of hundreds of spiders encircling them. In the frenzy, Vale succumbs to a spider bite, instinctively firing his weapon to repel the arachnids. As Vale regains his composure, Nick, transfixed by the sarcophagus, witnesses an ethereal silhouette materializing, a captivating woman traversing a desert landscape. It is Ahmanet herself who declares Nick as the chosen one. Shortly thereafter, Jenny rouses Nick from his trance-like state, and they hastily request helicopter assistance to transport the sarcophagus. With the artifact secured, they embark on a perilous journey to transport it to a research center in London. However, on the horizon, a looming sandstorm threatens their path. With urgency, the team swiftly loads the sarcophagus onto a cargo plane, soaring into the sky to escape the impending tempest. Unbeknownst to them, Vale, who had fallen victim to the spider's venom, silently succumbs to his fate on board the plane, his passing going unnoticed amidst the chaos. In the confines of the aircraft, Nick wrestles with his conscience, attempting to justify his earlier act of stealing Jenny's map. He argues that their illicit actions have led them to a remarkable heritage, but Jenny remains unforgiving, unwilling to let him off the hook so easily. At the opposite end of the unfolding events, Vale unexpectedly rises to his feet, determined to sever the rope binding the sarcophagus. In a shocking turn of events, he also viciously attacks the commander who attempts to thwart his actions. Panic ensues as chaos reigns. When Vale directs his aggression towards Nick, the latter is left with no choice but to defend himself, resulting in a fatal gunshot. Vale collapses, his life truly extinguished this time. The strangeness intensifies as thousands of crows descend upon the plane, colliding with it and causing severe damage to the engines. The aircraft begins its descent, hurtling towards an imminent crash. In a desperate act, Nick places a parachute on Jenny, ensuring her safety. However, he himself is left without a parachute, plummeting alongside the plane, which narrowly avoids colliding with a nearby monastery. The following day, within the confines of a London hospital, officials request Jenny to identify the bodies of the deceased, as she is the sole survivor of the plane crash. However, in a miraculous twist, one of the bodies, Nick, unexpectedly resurrects, defying death itself. To Nick's surprise, the figure of Vale also materializes. Moments later, Jenny and two officers enter the room, astounded by the sight of Nick, still alive, while Vale vanishes into thin air. In the meantime, not far from the monastery, two members of a search team examine the wreckage of the plane's wing fragments. Amid their investigation, one of them stumbles upon the sarcophagus, succumbing to curiosity and opening it. In an instant, the mummy within the sarcophagus awakens, bestowing a chilling kiss upon the unsuspecting explorer. The victim's body shrinks and withers beyond recognition. In a state of confusion, the mummy of Ahmanet, the ancient Egyptian queen, absorbs the life force of her victim, rejuvenating her own form. Ahmanet proceeds to awaken the two newly drained souls, who now move in sync with her intentions, obedient to her every command. Inside a secluded bar in town, Jenny and Nick find themselves grappling with the perplexing reality of Nick's miraculous survival. Jenny, who is more aware of the ancient secrets they have stumbled upon, reveals that she is part of a group of dedicated archaeologists who have tirelessly searched for the tomb of an ancient Egyptian princess. This princess, whose existence has been erased from historical records, holds significant importance in their quest. Additionally, their pursuit is intertwined with the coveted dagger adorned with a blood jewel embedded in its handle. Legends suggest that this dagger possesses the power to summon Set, the god of death, into the mortal realm. According to historical accounts, the blood jewel had been removed and secretively hidden away by the Knights Templar, who once ventured into the realms of Egypt. Remarkably, the recent discovery of the vast tomb complex beneath the city of London aligns with their pursuits. Jenny firmly believes that the sarcophagus they transported on the ill-fated plane contains the preserved body of Ahmanet, the very princess they have been relentlessly seeking. It becomes clear that Ahmanet's tomb was purposefully concealed far beyond the borders of Egypt, a calculated act to safeguard her from history's erasure. Amidst their conversation, Nick is startled to continue seeing the apparition of Vale, who beckons him to engage in a conversation. Skepticism initially fills Nick's mind, as he wonders if he is experiencing hallucinations, as he alone seems aware of Vale's presence. However, Vale persuades Nick that he is indeed real, revealing that they both bear a curse bestowed upon them within the cave. According to Vale, the only means of breaking this curse is by fulfilling the desires and wishes of Ahmanet. Vale discloses that Nick's survival from the plane crash is no coincidence. Rather, it is intricately tied to the grand plan set in motion by Ahmanet. Overwhelmed by these revelations, Nick succumbs to panic and abruptly leaves the bar, desperately attempting to process the weight of the information he has received. Outside, he is confronted by a chilling sight, an entity surrounded by a swarm of rats, relentlessly gnawing at its form. In the midst of this haunting vision, Nick suddenly finds himself on the road, only to be abruptly brought back to reality by Jenny, who awakens him from his trance-like state. Frantic, Nick shares the unsettling details of his encounter with Vale, but Jenny finds herself perplexed and hesitant to believe his accounts. However, Nick is once again gripped by a compelling vision, feeling an inexplicable force pulling him toward a specific location. He leads Jenny to the crash site, intent on finding the sarcophagus. However, when they arrive, Jenny is taken aback as Nick directs her toward the monastery instead of the scattered debris of the plane. Within the monastery's confines, Nick is struck by yet another vision, only to realize that he has already been drawn into the very location he sought. Suddenly, he is ambushed by 4 soldiers under the control of Ahmanet, whom herself emerges, a blend of mummy and human. Ahmanet reveals her intent to utilize Nick's body as a vessel to resurrect Set, the god of death. As she brandishes a dagger from within a statue, poised to strike Nick, her actions abruptly halt upon noticing the absence of the blood jewel on the dagger's handle. Jenny arrives, witnessing the chaotic scene, prompting Nick to urge her to flee. Enraged, Ahmanet gives chase, her wrath fueling her pursuit. Having narrowly escaped from Ahmanet's army, Nick manages to stab Ahmanet, just as she is on the verge of devouring Jenny's soul. They hastily flee the scene, utilizing a car as their means of escape. However, their efforts prove futile as they find themselves driving in circles through the surrounding forest, ultimately returning to the very monastery they sought to escape. Undeterred, Nick steps on the gas pedal in a desperate bid to flee once more. Unfortunately, Ahmanet's forces descend upon them, causing a catastrophic car accident. Miraculously, Nick and Jenny survive the ordeal. Unbeknownst to them, Ahmanet has already arrived at the scene, and Nick valiantly attempts to confront her. However, his efforts prove futile as Ahmanet overpowers him, flinging him aside. Moments later, an army suddenly arrives, launching an attack on Ahmanet and anesthetizing her with mercury. Confusion fills Nick's mind as he questions the identity of these newcomers. One of them proceeds to anesthetize Nick as well, rendering him unconscious. As Nick regains consciousness, he finds himself being escorted to a room filled with unsettling artifacts, including a preserved vampire skull encased in a glass tube. The individuals who had rescued him departed, leaving him alone in the room. Soon after, a man named Dr. Henry Jekyll appears before Nick. Jekyll introduces himself as a criminal psychologist, neurosurgeon, lawyer, and scientist, a multifaceted genius with a peculiar condition. He explains his unnerving ailment, characterized by trembling and darkened veins on his face. Demonstrating a potential remedy, Jekyll injects himself with a drug, causing the symptoms to dissipate within seconds. Jekyll reveals his lifelong quest to find a permanent cure for his condition, leading him to bring Nick to another room. In this room, Nick witnesses Ahmanet, now restrained and injected with mercury to dampen her powers. He also discovers that Jenny has been an undercover subordinate of Dr. Jekyll all along, concealing her true allegiance. Dr. Jekyll warmly welcomes Nick to Prodigium, an institution dedicated to studying and anticipating extraordinary phenomena that defy logical explanation, such as the likes of Ahmanet. He remarks that Ahmanet is the oldest discovery he has ever encountered, having been hidden for 5,000 years and effectively erased from history. Jekyll reveals that Nick has been cursed, chosen as the vessel for the resurrection of Set, the god of death. However, he assures Nick that there is a potential cure for his condition. Ahmanet interjects, asserting that destiny cannot be changed and the curse is indomitable. She tantalizes Nick with the promise of immortality, asserting that together they can reshape the world. Ahmanet convinces Nick that he will become a god, capable of resurrecting the dead and creating a new world where their desires reign supreme. Her words reverberate with a sinister allure. In an act of desperation, Ahmanet screams in agony as Dr. Jekyll intensifies the dosage of mercury injected into her body, attempting to subdue her powers. Later, Nick and Jenny find themselves seated together, their eyes fixed on Ahmanet's restrained form. Jenny expresses remorse for her lack of honesty from the beginning, acknowledging that she never anticipated Nick's entanglement in such extraordinary circumstances. She acknowledges Nick's inherent goodness, exemplified by his selfless act of sacrificing his own parachute to save Jenny during the plane crash. Nick, with a touch of wry humor, responds that he only assumed he had 2 parachutes at the time. Dr. Jekyll invites Nick into his office, where Nick implores him to immediately remove the curse. However, to Nick's dismay, Dr. Jekyll refuses, asserting that Nick must accept his destiny for the greater good of humanity. Jekyll presents a troubling proposition, urging Nick to sacrifice himself so that scientists can study and operate on his cursed body. This revelation angers Nick, fueling his frustration towards Dr. Jekyll's callous suggestion. On the other hand, Dr. Jekyll's men stumble upon the bloodstone that had been lost from the dagger's handle. Ahmanet, sensing the presence of the blood jewel, employs a small spider as her instrument. The arachnid infiltrates the ear of one of Dr. Jekyll's officers, serving as a conduit for Ahmanet's influence. Inside the office, Dr. Jekyll's body trembles uncontrollably. Desperate to reach his medicine, he reaches out, but Nick intercepts it. In a moment of chaos, Dr. Jekyll's plea for everyone present to flee goes unheard, leaving Nick trapped in the room with him. Jenny, having left in search of an alternative solution to save Nick, tries to find a way back. Suddenly, a profound transformation overtakes Dr. Jekyll, as he becomes completely overtaken by a malevolent entity known as Hyde. Hyde possesses extraordinary powers and exhibits multiple personalities distinct from Dr. Jekyll. He entices Nick to join forces, urging him to embrace his curse, promising that together they will become rulers of the world. In the midst of their struggle, Ahmanet successfully manipulates the officers into releasing her from her restraints. As Nick finds himself cornered, he seizes the medicine and thrusts it into Hyde's chest, causing him great pain and reverting him back to Dr. Jekyll. Jenny joins Nick, urging him to find and destroy the blood jewel, as without it, the ritual cannot be completed. When Nick escapes, Ahmanet, filled with rage, sets loose a sandstorm, intent on slowing him down and preventing his escape. Chaos ensues outside, with people panicking over the unnatural sandstorm. Within Dr. Jekyll's office, his men warn their colleagues to secure all access points to the underground tomb, recognizing that Ahmanet, now unleashed, will surely come for the blood jewel. Nick and Jenny navigate the treacherous sandstorm, seeking shelter and safety. Amidst the chaos, Nick catches a glimpse of Vale, who appears to guide him toward the location of the blood jewel. Trusting Vale's guidance, Nick follows him, unaware that Ahmanet has already arrived at the underground tomb, summoning the resurrected knight skeletons to serve as her loyal soldiers. In the meantime, Nick finds himself confronted by Ahmanet's relentless troops, prompting him to make a desperate dash to save Jenny. Inside the tomb, a knight's body springs to life, attacking the officers who had been trapped within. Paralyzed, the officers are coerced into opening the tomb's door, welcoming Ahmanet's imminent arrival. Within the tomb's depths, Ahmanet successfully locates the blood jewel and attaches it to the handle of the dagger, inching closer to her ultimate goal. In a different location, Nick and Jenny find themselves under attack by Ahmanet's relentless forces, eventually falling into a water-filled culvert. Suddenly, Ahmanet emerges from the depths and pulls Jenny into the water, leaving Nick desperate to chase after them. However, he struggles to locate Jenny and resurfaces to catch his breath before diving back down in search of her. To his horror, Nick discovers Jenny's lifeless body, running out of oxygen, while evading Ahmanet's pursuing forces. Determined, he retrieves Jenny's body and brings it to the surface. At that moment, Ahmanet's army captures Nick, and he is dragged before Ahmanet herself. There he witnesses Jenny's pale and lifeless form, prompting Ahmanet's troops to kneel, disintegrating into dust. Overwhelmed with grief, Nick launches an attack on Ahmanet, but his efforts prove futile. Ahmanet persistently urges Nick to surrender and accept his fate, yet he remains fixated on Jenny's lifeless body. Growing impatient, Ahmanet throws Jenny aside and brutally breaks Nick's leg. Despite Ahmanet's relentless taunting, Nick's defiance only fuels her anger. Unbeknownst to Ahmanet, Nick has secretly stolen her dagger and uses it to shatter the blood jewel. Witnessing this act, Ahmanet warns Nick that by breaking the jewel, he will die, losing the opportunity to control the realms of the living and the dead. In that moment, Nick gazes upon Jenny's lifeless body, hesitates briefly, and then plunges the dagger into his own body. Instantly, Nick undergoes a terrifying transformation. His eyes split into two, and he becomes Set, the god of death. In his new form, Nick walks towards Ahmanet and drops the dagger. However, upon seeing Jenny's body, he regains his consciousness and recalls Dr. Jekyll's words, reminding him of the necessity of sacrifice for the greater good. As Ahmanet attempts to distract Nick, he recalls Jenny's earlier words about him being a good person willing to sacrifice for others. Driven by this realization, Nick launches a final assault on Ahmanet, sucking her soul until nothing remains. Ahmanet's body once again becomes mummified, while Nick, injured but determined, limps toward Jenny's lifeless form. Overwhelmed by grief, Nick sheds tears and apologizes to Jenny's revived body. In the midst of his anguish, he passionately calls out Jenny's name, pleading for her to return from the realm of the dead. Miraculously, Jenny awakens, her eyes scanning her surroundings, her attention drawn to the used dagger nearby. Spotting Nick in the distance, Jenny moves towards him, but he shouts, warning her to keep her distance. Nick, realizing the potential danger he poses as a non-human entity, refuses to risk hurting Jenny. Just as Jenny processes Nick's plea, Dr. Jekyll arrives on the scene. To everyone's surprise, Nick suddenly disappears, leaving them perplexed and seeking answers. Within the confines of Prodigium headquarters, Dr. Jekyll takes precautions, sealing the mummified form of Ahmanet with mercury. Contemplating the potential alliance between Nick, who has become the god of death, and himself, Jekyll considers the necessity of uniting against the impending threat. Deep in the desert, Nick revives his loyal companion, Vale. Determined to uncover the truth behind his transformation, Nick invites Vale to embark on a journey across the Middle East, seeking answers and understanding the events that have transpired. The moral of the story is that in the realm of ancient curses, treasure hunts, and mummy awakenings, always remember to double-check your travel itineraries. Make sure you're not accidentally heading back to the same spooky place you just escaped from.